All right, what's your name and where are you from?
Hey, my name's Jared York. I was born in Rome, Georgia. Grew up in Tampa, Florida. Then I moved to Crossville, Tennessee, and then ever since then I've lived in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Did you enjoy moving around a lot as a kid? Or do you kind of wish you would have been in one of those places a longer time?
I would say at first, when I was younger, I didn't quite understand maybe like the reason behind having to move that much, but as I got older, I really started to enjoy like the change of scenery and getting to like experience different parts of the country and whatnot.
Where did you spend the longest?
Wilmington.
Okay. Tell me a little about your family. Do you have siblings? Are you close with any of your parents in particular?
Yeah, I have a great relationship with both my parents. My dad is a music minister, so that was kind of why I grew up moving around. My mom is like a technology um, coordinator for school systems. And I have two brothers, Alex and Taylor. Alex is married to his wife Laura, and Taylor just graduated college. So
Gotcha. Do you think those people, like, which of your brothers are you closest with?
I would say I'm really close with both of them, um,
Kind of equally?
pretty equally. I guess it's sort of changed over the years. I was closer with Alex maybe at first, but then once he like moved away and went to college, I developed a stronger relationship with Taylor.
Have
But
they both had a pretty big influence on you, though, like growing up?
for sure, 100%. Alex is a graphic designer. That's what I'm majoring in right now.
Okay.
Artistically speaking, like I've been really influenced by him, and Taylor on the same aspect in terms of music, because that's something that we all share, and he's been a huge influence.
So would you say those people influenced a lot of your characteristics, kind of like how you act and just the way you carry yourself, or is it more just the interests?
It definitely has to do with the way I carry myself. Me and Alex, uh, in the same regard, can be very stubborn, um, and a bit of a perfectionist. And I feel like me and Taylor have the same sense of humor, the same like um, type of I don't know, just maybe the way we carry ourselves in public. Me and him are pretty similar.
Sure. How do you think your brothers perceive you? Do you think they perceive you that way?
I would be interested in hearing what they have to say about that. But I think to a good degree they recognize like maybe parts of themselves in me.
Sure. So, I mean, they know you pretty well, and they probably have a pretty good perception of you as a person. But when it comes to people who don't know you very well, how do you think, just first impression, like when people meet you, how do you think they perceive you right away?
Probably pretty quiet at first. I like to think I'm extroverted, but in the same sense, like I'm not the most outgoing person, and it'll maybe take a bit of time to get me to open up to some people. Um, I would like to think people think I'm pretty positive. That's something I always try and do. I don't like to come off as like a pessimist, um, or just negative in general, because that's something that I try and like avoid.
So positivity is definitely something that you want people to see in you.
Yeah, for sure. And they probably maybe creative, just because all the types of things that I'm interested in and whatnot. So.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to say that you should care what other people think about you,
Mm-hmm.
but it is interesting, right, to think,
Yeah.
When I walk up to people, what do they think about me right away? Because everybody kind of gives off their own vibe, right?
Certainly.
So that might be how other people see you right away, but how do you see yourself? Like when you just self-reflect, like what kind of person do you think you are?
It's a pretty good question. Let's see.
And this is just being like honest
Yeah,
with
being
yourself.
honest with myself.
Yeah.
Let me think for a second. Um, I like to think that I'm very. I don't
Here,
want to
how-
sound cheesy, like saying.
let me give it to you this way. Give me some ways that you perceive yourself positively that you like about yourself.
I definitely think I'm very mindful, and I try and keep myself in the present and not focus on maybe like negative like self chatter that I have. I like to think that like I don't know, my thoughts don't necessarily make me who I am. It's like my actions. Um, so
Do you believe that thought often leads to action?
certainly, and I think that the way in which like people view their own thoughts is very telling about how they end up acting on those actions.
Okay. Kind of to shift gears a little bit. What do you said you're a graphic design major? Is that what you're
Yeah.
studying at Appalachian right now?
Hmm.
What's your major and minor, just to kind of like get a better sense of that?
So yeah, I will be majoring in graphic design, and then my minor is commercial photography.
Okay. Are you doing anything like extracurricularly or like even through your classes that it's kind of that builds your resume in that area?
For sure. I recently joined AIGA, which is a graphic design club, and I also work for UREC as a publicity programmer, and my role there entails like a lot of design practice. I make a bi-monthly publication for Club Sports. It's Club Sports Illustrated. You should check it out.
Cool.
That's pretty dope. But that has definitely been a great resume builder, and it's been great experience that I'm really glad to have under my belt.
So, you said your brother was really into graphic design, and obviously you seem to be pretty into it too. Would you say that kind of all this, your career path is all falling in line with stuff that you're passionate about?
Certainly. And it's funny, when I first came here, I was kind of hesitant to jump into graphic design. And looking back, I'm not sure what finally clicked and what took me to like make that change. I just don't think I was maybe confident enough in my abilities, but once I started taking those intro classes and it really opened my mind to like what design is and what it can be, I was definitely on board, and I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Do you think maybe the biggest change or factor in you making that decision was your confidence in your own ability?
Certainly, and the same regard, it was I guess my understanding of what design could be wasn't fully there yet, and when I saw the directions that the field was going, like I knew that was the type of work I wanted to be doing.
Okay. If there were no limitations at all, what would your ideal career be in that field right now? Like, do you have something in particular that you'd pick out for yourself?
Right now, I think it would be environmental graphic design and communications. And I mean, are you familiar with what that is?
I'm not. Could you detail that for me a little more?
So environmental graphics or environmental graphic design is kind of a way of thinking outside of like the 2D realm of what most people think. For instance, like a project I saw that like really inspired me in that field was this design firm Pentagram in New York did a total renovation of the way that New York City's subway system, like all the visual communication aspects of it, the way those were presented, and anything from like signage to like directions to the subway, spanning across like the entire city. And I was like totally captivated by it, and I thought, wow, I never realized that like I'm not just gonna be making like posters, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can think a lot bigger and have a much bigger impact with that type of work, I think.
So you definitely want to make your work meaningful, not just stuff that people need for certain things. Like you want to express things with that.
Certainly, and I think that's one thing that's been really cool learning about design is, as a designer, my role isn't necessarily to like go out there and put all of my creative ideas into action, but it's to take somebody else's problem, look at the stipulations around it, and design within those parameters to make something that is functional and aesthetically pleasing. So
Okay. So what do you think that's the career that you aspire to have? What do you think are some limitations that might be keeping you from getting there?
limitations. Okay. I think the field right now is really saturated. I think in the art department, I mean, like here at App State, I think it's like the biggest major for anybody who's in the art department. And with the increase of technology, there's like, sure, there are endless ways for people to be designing and like putting that type of material out there, but the field has become really saturated. So I think distinguishing myself from others and making my work, you know, recognizable and different.
How do you go about doing that?
That's a good question. Maybe one that I haven't figured out yet, considering I'm not there.
Sure.
But
It's a process.
it's definitely a process, and I think there's a clear distinction between like maybe people that I've seen in terms of how far they allowed themselves to go.
Okay.
I feel like the biggest limitation there would maybe be like a mental restraint that they have.
That's really interesting that you say that, because my next question for you is, do you think that you, especially in the line of work that you're going into, are your own biggest limitation?
That's a good question. And I think very well, if anything is going to hold me back, it would probably be myself.
Not that you're not good enough.
Not that
more
I'm not
just
good enough.
If in my opinion, like if you don't believe something is possible,
Exactly.
then how could it ever come into fruition? You know, so in my opinion, in any industry, specifically yours, you know, especially if you don't believe in yourself, how are you ever supposed to succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question for you would be, do you think that believing in yourself and having confidence in yourself is probably the most important thing to succeed?
I would say so. And the more I think about it, your role as a designer is essentially to, you know, work with your client about what they want, but you have to convince them why your design works and why this is the solution that they should opt to use. And obviously there's like a conversation there and it goes back and forth and you make changes. But if you're not confident in your work and you're not able to talk about it comfortably with other people, then that's going to be your biggest problem. Like, certainly I think you have to believe in yourself in order to make it in that type of industry, because otherwise people will just cut you down, and you have to make your voice known.
You talk a little bit about, you know, other people might try to cut you down. You know, it's also, like you said, a saturated industry, so there's a lot of other people in it, and a lot of it is other people's opinion. I mean, you might produce a piece and a lot of it has to do with what other people think about it. Do you think that the way that other people perceive you and the way that other people perceive your work could also play a big role in your success, and how might you detail that?
Certainly, I think there are times in people's careers where maybe one piece gets recognized on a much larger scale than everything else, and then they sort of blow up and they use that momentum. And that's art. Like, it's opinion, and most of the time people feel very strongly about it. So others' opinion, to a degree, is important. I would think in terms of, you know, your long-term career and like how you develop over that time. But I wouldn't rely on it.
Would you rely more on your own opinion?
Certainly.
So perception seems to be pretty important when it comes to success within the industry, not because it's other people's perception and it's your own perception of yourself, right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is the way that you believe in your work and the way that other people believe in your work, that's pretty much key to moving forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. At the same time, like, if somebody thinks your work is good, if a lot of people tell you that your work is good, that doesn't necessarily mean you're good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a
what
weird...
What do you think means that you're good?
I think the mark of a good designer is being able to work within the limitations with which they're presented and push every single limitation to its like maximum like capability, I suppose.
So if you believe that your own perception of yourself could potentially be a limitation to your success, like if you don't believe in yourself or you don't have confidence in yourself, then that could potentially be a limitation. And you like to push limitations, that's success. How can you push the limitations of simply your own perception on yourself? Like is there a point where you say, I can't do this, or do you think the best possible answer is to never give yourself any limitations? Because the minute you give yourself a limitation, it becomes a limitation. Does that make sense?
Sure, that makes sense, but I wouldn't say never, not that I want to limit myself in any regard, but I don't know, I found it's easier not to, because when I'm trying to think of like how to create my work, my ideas sometimes overrun my mind, and it's very hard to filter through them. So I wouldn't say I'm limiting like the scope of what I can do,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to look at certain things and say, maybe this isn't the best solution. Like I have to like just put that one aside and table it.
How do you kind of walk the line between being realistic about approaching a situation,
Yeah, and that's
and being too realistic, like almost saying like, I can't do that, so I'm gonna have to do this. Like how do you find the balance between a realistic possibility but also not placing limitations on yourself?
and yeah, so that's essentially what I was trying to get at. That's the way I couldn't find the words, but those were them. In terms of saying like, okay, maybe this is too ambitious and right now I can't do it, but that's the way I keep from limiting myself. I'm like, this is pretty ambitious for what I'm trying to do right now, but I'm not gonna discount it forever and say like, I can't do that. Maybe I will get to doing that, and maybe that's gonna be like my next branch of work, or that's what I want to like try and work towards. And it's a hard line to walk. Like I obviously want to be ambitious, and I want other people to think maybe my work is ambitious, but being too ambitious is gonna hurt because it's just not. You're not going to be able to execute it with the same level of quality as other.
So maybe the ambition is more long term than it is short term.
Certainly, yeah.
Because if you keep yourself from being ambitious, then you almost put yourself in a bubble. But I also see what you're saying, where if you're too ambitious, you stretch your own limits too far, at least for where you're at currently, right? Does that make sense?
That really makes sense.
So I guess my last thing would be like, how do you decide something is too ambitious? Like what kind of goes through your mind when you're like, I think this is a bit much?
Well, typically with let's say in school, like any of the projects I have, I'll come up with a cool idea. I'll be like, all right, I want to execute this, but maybe I don't have the time, resources, or money to like pull that type of a project together. So right now, that's what it is. And I think for most designers, that's going to be it. Like some ideas they'll have will be very ambitious, but the restrictions like force them to pull back, you know? But that's another thing that I think is exciting about design, because like learning how to work within like the limitations and parameters that you have, and coming up with a solution that's like great and like innovative, like that's what it's all about.
It's almost ironic, right? Like for you, career-wise, having no limitations would be becoming extremely good at working within limitations, right?
Yes. Yeah, and limitations are necessary for that type of work, and I think they're necessary for most types of creative work. because it gives you, it's essentially problem solving. You know, you have to figure out a way to solve the problem, and maybe a way that nobody's done before, and that's what's new and exciting.
Now, when it comes to your career aspirations, though, how do you feel about limitations? Like, just as far as, like, when you think about where can I go with this career, do you already put limitations on that, or do you try to, I guess, how do you try to keep yourself from limiting yourself when it comes to foreseeing how you might want your career path to take?
I personally haven't, in my mind, put any limitations on maybe, or restrictions on where this will take me. Who knows? I mean, the industry is always rapidly changing. Like, new forms of technology change everything, like, especially in that line of work. And there's so many different mediums to work in and so many different types of work that I can't say where I'll be maybe 20 years from now. It may be doing something I never would have thought I would do. But as long as I'm designing stuff, I think I'll be happy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. That's what I got for you.
Thanks, dude.